Next up, we're going to look at fire. Now this is going to be cool because it means we can play around and look at how this works. Essentially, the gradients that we look at are always, I'm just going to copy this so I can bring it back if I need to, but the way they work is it's left to right. So left to right is the left is the outermost area of your gradient, and this is all based on density. So keep in mind this isn't temperature based or anything like that. It's purely based on density. So my left I might make red, and it means like the very outer edge is going to be the least dense area will be red, whereas the densest area, which we probably won't see that much, like the core of it, because obviously the shade is so dense we never get to that part. But it could be, I'll make it green or something like that. Alright, so it means that it gets denser, 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 and at some point it's so dense we don't really see inside. If I was to lower the density, essentially, we could see inside. I could lower my density and pump up the color or whatever, but ultimately the far right, we never really get to see that far inside of it. So usually this will be the area that will become visible. So I can make this more of a blue, and as we can see, it cycles over to blue over time. So this is kind of like my playground area. These are the colors that I can play with. I can make this more of a yellow, and these will cycle through it as it cycles through the density of the fire. So again, I'm not worrying about this side, but it means that the outer density is initially going to start out and begin to burn and expand and cycle through these colors, and as it begins to dissipate, we definitely see more of the left side because the density is dying out. Let's close my material editor, and so here we can see it doing exactly that. Whenever you see me turning my real time off, I'm just right clicking on my play button and I'm just turning this off. It means that it won't try and keep an active frame rate, consistent frame rate. Instead, it'll play every frame smoothly, which means it might slow down over time. As we can see, it's about a second per frame, but we get this to play every single frame rather than skipping frames. So I do that just to see things a bit smoother because I'm not worried about my frame rate with this. Now, at the same time, we also have the fire opacity, and this works exactly the same way. It's a gradient, or it's not a gradient, it's a graph that represents the opacity from the lowest density to the highest density, or in other words, from the outer area to the center, I should say. So this controls essentially the outer edge to the center. So if I wanted to see more of the center, in other words, like the green area that we don't usually see, I could bring this up, and it means that the densest area is in fact the core of it. And I can play with this, bring it down, 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 until we don't really see anything except for the inner core. And suddenly we do get to actually see a lot more of the green areas. So this is a way that we can control the density, whether we want to see the outer areas or more the inside of it. So this is good if I wanted to make the flames a bit thinner. Rather than having to resim them smaller, I can pull it back to kind of make it retract in more. Or I can make them a lot more thicker. So this is good on tendril-based flames. I might want to make a graph that I'm not too worried about the center, but I am more interested in getting the outer edge, because this is where a lot of the more tendrily bits are going to be lingering. So a lot more of the detail. So here I can bring this in, or I can control it to be more dense. If I wanted to, I could pull the furthest across over, and that way we're going to get absolute density on the edges. You don't ever really want to do this because ultimately you still want to have a little bit of fall off here, okay? Because this is where the voxels will become visible. So if I pull the edges up so that way it's got a hard fall off, this means it's like geometry. I'm actually seeing the very edge, there's no fall off to it, provided I don't have any fall off set up here. So by doing this, suddenly we're going to see a lot more voxels because there is no fall off on the edges. Now if I were to pull this down a little bit, there will be at least some fall off now being applied. So we get a nicer kind of fall off to the edges. It's a bit more soft. And again, I can pull this down and kind of play with that to get it to retract a lot more. So these are ways that essentially I can get that to happen, to be able to get the edges to have a nice fall off but still be kind of bold, or get denser towards the core of it, or whatever I want to do. And these all apply to what I'm doing. The thing is, I can right click and disable this. Oops, right click and disable. And that means that instead it's going to use the luminance values of this color gradient for the densities. So this is interesting because it means that my gradient can have two purposes. It can hold a color value as well as the luminance being the alpha. So the outer edge right now is 100% opaque because my left color here is 100%, or 256 colors to work with. So I can lower this and suddenly we get a lot more fall off. If I push these over more, I get this value here, and I push this in too. Suddenly the most opaque one is the blue, and again I can bring that in and continue to do that until all we have is the core colors being the brightest. So these are ways that I can actually have my gradient control. Okay, well, where this color is going to be dense and this one's going to be less. A good example, I'm just going to load up a color gradient, the exact one that we had before. Now this is interesting to look at because everything in this color is black except for this area here, and we have a lot of variation, but the colors themselves aren't really that strong, so it's still going to have some transparency to it. Now let's copy that so I have it safe to if I want to play with it. But basically this means that now my fire is got more fall off to it, because the outer edge is kind of like dealing with polygons. There's no core center, but instead I get this nice kind of fall off to the flames. And I'll turn the smoke off for a second just so I can look at the fire, but now we can see that this is rolling up and doing its thing. It's pretty interesting to look at. And all of the opacity is based on the density being at its lowest. So when it's lower, it's actually a lot more bright. I can completely play with this. I could get this color and move it back, so that way I can shift these and we can get a lot more variation in color over time. And I can kind of choose, if I wanted to, I could get my color here and punch it up, and it means that the opacity, like the density of it, is going to punch up too, because we're relying on the actual luminance of it for the opacity. So not only is it the color, but it's also the opacity. So this is just an interesting way to work, and I sometimes do this just because it means that I'm not getting really dense areas in an area that doesn't have any color. Okay, so that way it's very specific to areas I put color into are also going to have some density as well. Now, at the same time, we also have the color and opacity. These essentially do almost the same thing. One is opacity, so it's how opaque it's going to be, and the other one is how much color is being put into it. The thing is that also applies to making it brighter. So essentially, I could punch up, like I have the opacity low and then punch the opacity up. I'm going to make it thicker. At the same time, I could punch up the color and it's going to make it thicker as well. So there isn't going to be that much of a range of difference. The only thing that's really going to get affected is the alpha. So I'll render out a frame here, and actually I'll bump this up a little bit just so we can see it a bit better. So I showed the alpha and it's quite low. Now I can bump up the color and we see it's really blown out. But we render out the alpha and the alpha is still the same, but the color is obviously blown out. So in this case, if I was to click separate alpha, we notice that the alpha is actually different again, and So that is something that we can, kind of keep in mind altogether. But ultimately, if I were to bring these back down, let's say 0.5 and 0.5, my alpha is kind of strong, but then I can bump this up to 20. My alpha is going to be completely opaque. So the thing is that most of the time I'll keep these at 1 roughly for fire, and I'll usually bring the color down a little bit. I don't want my colors to ever blow out too much. The secret of how at least I work is that I try not to keep my exposures on anything too high. I don't want anything to be overexposed. So I try and keep my color range from going too dark or too bright. I want it to be at pretty much the right amount of variation to have the best range that I can have, and that way I can go on my comp and I can get the brights, like the yellow areas here, and punch them back up to get bright again. But if I make them too bright already, even though we are working usually in float, I can bring that all back down. I usually want to keep that at a better variation level so I can control it a lot better and punch it up myself. However, when I'm doing explosions, like if I have smoke on here, what I will tend to do, or any thick base fire, what I tend to do is keep my color range lower, but I'll pump up the opacity fairly high. And that way I get more of a solid based effect to work with, and it's not as transparent, it's very thick. Okay, so that's usually something that I'll do. And we'll get into that in some practical exercises after this, but that is kind of like how I'll usually work. Now, what we're looking at is, again, just a quick flame that's rolling up into the air and dissipating. Now, what we can do is I'm going to look at a couple other just things really briefly. One is that we have a map source. Now, this map source, there's a couple of things we can do. We can change this to world coordinates, which means we put a map in, and all it's going to do is it's going to use the 3D map to control the density. So most of the time that's not going to work too well, because it might work if you have a big patch of fog and you just want to run a 3D map through it to kind of make some areas denser and some areas lighter. And we can have a lot of detail inside the texture map, but it's not locked to the texture. So if the smoke or whatever it is moving, the texture won't move with it. But in some situations it can be pretty useful just to wield some results. But most of the time we either want to have this off or turn to fluid mapping. If we have fluid mapping on and we don't have any fluid mapping calculated, when we go to render, it's going to pop up and say it can't find any fluid mapping. So make sure you go to simulate, and we go down here and we adjust fluid mapping. And here's just like the latency, so how locked to the texture it is, or how much lag it is, how much offset. But if we have fluid mapping turned on and we simulate, keep in mind you have to simulate it, then when we have fluid mapping turned on, we can apply a texture to this. So here I've loaded up my material editor, and I can go and assign a texture, and I'm just going to apply a noise to this. Make a fractal, give it some levels, there's a bit of detail inside of it. I'll adjust the high and low values. Keep it on object XYZ for the time being. But I will lock this on. And ultimately, the way this works is at 100% you're going to see nothing but the texture. So I'll just zoom in on this and make it a little bit more brighter so we can see this. But as we can see, there's a lot more detail being computed than if we turned off fluid mapping. So it's essentially controlling the density. And by turning it on, we get a lot more detail being pushed through it. But again, it's not really like the holy grail. It's more just, it's going to be a nice addition, but it's not